Hello. Now we've already got to a solution in terms of allocating all fixtures to the schedule, and we've reached this point here in the scheduling worksheet tab. Now in other videos I've shown what very quickly what you do after this and how you get through to the export stage. This is specifically about how can you optimize the schedule from this point on. Now the most obvious thing you can do if you're really not happy with it is you can just go back and run the whole thing again, and you might want to do that. For the moment, let's look here though at this intervals report tab. Now this will, by default, this will be empty. If you need to clear the data, then you can click here, clear data, but by default there should be nothing here. The next one here is calculate intervals, and when I click this, you'll see here that it looks at all of the teams and it sees what's the average wait, what's the longest wait, and how many hours are they at the festival for. And if they're highlighted, they're either the longest or the shortest in among all of the teams. So Tungchung here is at the festival for 2.2 hours, and its longest wait is four matches, 4 games, which actually isn't very much. This is an under 7 age group, and 4 matches really isn't very much as the longest wait of the whole thing. I'd actually be more concerned about, and the reason for that is because under 7s are playing something like they're playing less than 10 minutes a match, so we're really not talking about a long wait for them. I'd be more concerned about the teams that have the longest wait of only 1 match, which basically means that for these teams, and that is for 6 teams, they have an on-off type match. Now there's several things that you can do here. So as I mentioned earlier, one of them is that you can just rerun the whole thing again, and you can do that and you can tweak the grouping priority side of things. So for example, you could swap this one up here and move it up a row or move it up 2 rows, so that all of the H, I, J, K, and so on teams end up playing a little bit they start a little bit earlier, and then they have a bit more of an enforced gap, and there's various things where you can sort of interleave these a little bit more. Now the other thing you can do is in putting late starts and early finishes in, so you can force a bit more. You can force a few things on the schedule that might help to address that. But for the moment, for the purpose of this video, it's specifically looking at the optimize tools in this tab, and then it's also going to be looking at the single fixture optimization and the single team optimization. Okay, so the intervals report itself has got 2 macros. Now the first of these is much quicker to do, and it runs through every fixture, and it says I'm going to compare that fixture to another fixture and see, would swapping these give me a better result, and that is based on an ideal, what we've got here is an ideal break, which is 2.5 matches, which basically means that if it's indifferent between 2 and 3 matches as a gap, but it prefers, say, 3 matches to a gap of 1, and it prefers 2 matches to a gap of 4. So 2.5. Now, if you're trying to lengthen the whole day, you might set that to 3. If you're finding 2.5 doesn't do it, set it to 3 and see if that eliminates some more of these single gap matches, which are genuinely, they're playing 4 matches and they're playing, then they're off for 1 match, a gap of 1 match, then they're back on, and then they're off again for 1 match. and it's really a bit too rushed when when the matches are only, say, 7 minutes long or 8 minutes or something like that. Okay, the other one is multi-optimize. Now this is it takes much longer to run through, and what it does, for every team, it looks at each of its matches, or for every single match it looks at that match and picks another 2 matches, and literally it runs through in trios for many huge numbers of alternatives, and says, if I shuffle those 3 matches around, can I get a better result? Now you can set that to here, maximum steps. You can set that to 4 or more, but it takes ages, and you generally don't get a better result. But literally, at that point, you're taking 4 matches, and you're seeing, what if I shuffle all of those around? And it's literally this is comparing every single possible fixture within that group of 3, and it's looking at every single possible group of combinations of 3 matches across the entire schedule. So first thing I'm going to do, I'll do here is copy interval summary. And you see here in this chart, you've got the number of weights, which is how many teams have to wait, how many matches are there, how many matches are there where in between matches there's a gap of, say, 1 match or 2 matches, 3 matches or 4 matches. And then this is how many teams have as their maximum weight, 1, 2, 3 or 4. And you can see already that it's mostly the largest matches, the largest gap rather, is 2, and there are more 3s and 4s, but still there are 6 teams here with a single match. Now this original here is just the data that's been copied across here, and the latest is here, and the reason for that will become clear when we optimize, and you'll see effectively the before and after. So for the moment I'll do the quick optimize, just so you get a quick idea. And you see it's just running through so it's run through a little bit more than 19,000 possibilities there. You can see that the number of single match, so latest here in the sort of, I don't know what this reddy purple column is down a little bit. And you can see the totals here. It's gone from 81 to 73, but there are still 6 teams that have an on-off type one. What you can also see is that it's bunched things up a bit more. It's brought down the 4s and it's shoved those into 3s, although it's also brought down the 2s. But in terms of the overall clubs, it's just bunched things up a little bit more towards the middle, which is what we're aiming for. Now I'm going to click multi-optimize, and there we go. You can see here that it's running through a lot of different possibilities, and for each of those possibilities it's looking to shuffle things and compare the output and see across a number of different sort of metrics which is getting the better result. Now in the video editing, I'm going to skip forward from here to right to the very end. Okay, so you can see that it has bunched things up a little bit more still, but it's still not ideal, right? You still got quite a lot of teams that have got a single match here. So we could run it again, or we could lengthen this out to 3 and run it and so on. But what I'm going to do now is move on to, so just to be clear, if I was doing this for a genuine festival, I probably would run it again. But in terms of the demonstration, what I'm doing here is going to single fixture optimization. And first of all, you click here, update data, and that brings in the same same set of intervals data that was in the intervals report, but it also brings in a schedule. So you can see here, well, you'll be able to see here, for example, when we go East Kowloon 4, select that in this column here and click team. So you can see here it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off, and so on. And what we're then going to do is say lengthen day. And what this does is just looks at possible swaps that you can make at a fixture level. So effectively this one here, problem fixture is 1105, and effectively there's only two possibilities here that you could do. You can either move this fixture. Well, actually, I suppose you could pick any of these fixtures and you could move them further out here to create more of a gap. You could pick, either it's 1105, 1115, sorry, 1125, 1145, or it's 1205 fixture, and you could either move them earlier or you can move them later to create a more of a gap for them. But that also has implications for other teams that are playing. And what this does is show you only the ones that are actually that you could realistically do. For example, by not allowing, now if you go back to this seeding and selection, we've got in here a minimum and a maximum break. And so this single fixture optimization won't take you beyond that, won't take any team beyond a 6 match gap, for example. And it also, of course, won't give anybody a back-to-back match, and it won't give any team a match where they're already playing in that time slot. And so there are a fairly limited number of changes you can make. Now, this shows you the before and after for each of the teams that are involved in this. So East Kowloon would go from playing having a 1 match maximum gap to a 2 match gap. Their opponents would go from having a 2 match maximum gap to a 3 match maximum gap. And the possible swap candidate, which is at 1055 here, the one before, would go from would basically see their total day shortened, but they would still have the same maximum gap. And then Valley 1 would see their total day shortened a little bit too. But each of them would have a better, the end result would still be better for them than the current situation for East Kowloon. And the same is also true for here. This would basically be one where you'd end up lengthening the day. One thing you can do here is you can highlight the fixtures. So you can see we're talking about swapping this fixture with this fixture. If we instead selected anywhere within this one here, you can see that it's talking about swapping again this fixture with this fixture, and you can see why that would lengthen that overall day, because Police 2 would end up 1 match later. They already start quite early here. So really that's up to you as to which you do. Now, just for the moment here, I'm going to say that we swap these ones here. Now, this moves when we highlight the fixtures up here, it moves the swap information, the potential swap information up here. So it's swapping 1055 on pitch 1 with 1105 on pitch 2, which is what we've got here. We can, if we want, simulate this, and it basically gives pretty much the same data that we've got here, shows you the gaps and and so on. But basically, I've already decided we're going to make this swap, so let's make the swap here, and that then makes the swap in this schedule here, but it also makes the swap in this scheduling worksheet, the output. And So you can see that East Kowloon 4 now is no longer an on-off type team. Let's just pick one more here. Let's lengthen the day. Okay, there are no possible solutions that would allow Football Club 1 to have a longer day, and that's because of some conflict that would prevent any of the possible opponents swapping in to any of its fixtures. It's not unheard of. Now let's also look at DBP 3, who've got a long day, 2 hours and, well, basically 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's not really that unrealistic. I mean, actually with DB Pirates, we would have probably given them a late start anyway. But just going with what we've got here, 8:45, and they're still finishing at they start their last match at 10:55, so they're finishing at 11:05. You know, it's a little over 2 hours. It's not too objectionable. But assuming that we wanted to change it, let's go for a shortened day, and these are the possible ones that would allow us to shorten that day. Now we can go all the way down here, so that we've got a limited number of possibilities. What we're really looking for here is to make sure that, and just instead, now pink means it's a longer day, blue means it's a shorter day. We're just making sure that we don't end up giving anybody a ridiculously long day. You know, ideally, if we're shortening the day, we don't want to give somebody a 2 hour 20-minute day. We want somebody to be less than that. But you know, this might be this would be an improvement, because they would be 10 minutes shorter. They would also be a fairly long day, but very much you know, within within expectations, a shorter day. They would have a slightly longer day. They would have you turn a short day into a slightly longer day. So let's highlight those fixtures, and you can see what's going to change. So DB Pirates would end 1 time slot earlier, and that would also that would do the same for, okay, and then yeah, they would push East Kowloon and FC8 one later. So you can see how that would lengthen out that Football Club day, but still Football Club would be a shorter day than DB Pirates, and similarly East Kowloon would be a shorter day than DB Pirates. Let's make that swap, and there you can see that it's been made. Now we can keep on doing that one by one, and you know, roughly speaking, that's what we do. But the other alternative that we can do is single team optimization. And this is the reason that we can do this, and I'm just going to update matrix to update data to bring everything in. The reason we can do this is because this is a non-contact age group, and so we're pretty indifferent as to who plays who, as long as we maintain the same constraints, such as teams not playing the same club twice, and all the sort of things of, you know, not having back-to-back matches and so on. Now, in this we couldn't find a solution for Football Club 1, but let's see if we can find a solution to lengthen its day by, okay, we still can't find any, this is interesting, so there isn't a single team that we could swap in, and in this case we're not talking about fixtures, we're talking about just a team. And again, that does happen, so let's try a different one. I want to just show you how we'd lengthen a day. We'll find something where we lengthen a day. So Sandy Bay, and what we're saying here is the problem team's time. So we're either talking about the 11:15 or the 12:15. So either we swap the 11:15 match for USRC's 10:55, USRC 2's 10:55, or we swap the 11:15 with an 11:05, or we swap the 12:15 with a 12:25. And let's just highlight these one by one so you can see. So you can see here Sandy Bay swaps with another Sandy Bay team, and you can see here the data that you get. You've got the problem team before and the problem team after, and then this is the candidate team before and after. So the candidate team before had a maximum gap of 3 but a minimum gap of 2. So you can see here it's got a gap of 3 and each of its matches have a gap of 2. But if we were to swap this for this, then of course this one would be a gap of only 1. So actually that's a fairly reasonable profile for HKU5, because they've got a reasonable gap, a shorter gap, and then a very short gap. And that would definitely be worth doing to give these guys a gap of 2. So actually we can just, well, we can go ahead and do that. But what we also do here is just simulate, and this pulls up basically the matches, the opponents for the problem team before. So before we do anything, it's playing East Kowloon 3, Valley 1, Stingrays 2, and Tai Hang Tung 2. And the problem team after are playing, well, and think of it this way, right? Before, they're playing Tai Hang Tung 2, after they're playing Taipo. So in the overall sort of scheme of things, we look at, do they have a good blend of large clubs and small clubs and so on beforehand. We also look at who the opponents have got. Now in this case it's pretty easy because we're swapping Sandy Bay 2 with Sandy Bay 5. So from the opponents, Tai Hang Tung 2 and Taipo, there's really no difference to them as to whether they're playing Sandy Bay 2 or 5. But yeah, we're looking at the from a Sandy Bay 2 perspective, we're swapping. They've already got 2 large clubs and they've got 2 small clubs. Afterwards, they will still have 2 large clubs and they'll still have 2 small clubs. For Sandy Bay 5, they've got 2 large clubs and then like a medium-sized club and a smaller club. So a similar profile for them as again, as to Taipo and Tai Hang Tung are not by no means identical, but as a scheduler, you'd be really hard pressed to say, to know really what impact that's going to have on these teams. And so I think you'd make that swap, or that would be one that you could make. Now this is another one where we can. So that's the one that I already highlighted. So now if we look at this one instead, we're talking about lengthening the day for USRC and for Sandy Bay by swapping these ones. Now this is probably not desirable because it maybe takes USRC2 out to to one of the longest days. It's still, I think, reasonable within the context of this age group, but it's I think this one would be a better swap. This one, because it would bring your candidate team down to 1 minute and 1 hour and 20 minutes total day. I just think this one, the one below, would be a better thing. So highlight again and then make actual swap, and then you can see that this is HKU5 now playing here and this is HKU2. So you can go through team by team and make those swaps. And sometimes what you'll find is also that that having made a swap, you can things will change effectively. Now, that a candidate does turn up that wasn't available to you before. There's also later and earlier, and why don't if I just pick, say, this one, Stingrays 4, as a and I want to see if I can make that match earlier. And you might do this because I don't know, they need to get off. Well, if this is an afternoon schedule, they might need to get off early because they've got, I don't know, buses, or they're Macau and they've got boats to catch, or they're a Singapore team or something like that. So earlier looks at whether there's anybody. It doesn't look like there is anybody. it's basically looking, is there anybody that you could take their latest match, their last match, and swap it for? Probably, actually. Okay, let's look at a more likely one than this. East Kowloon. Now, when we go earlier for East Kowloon, we should get some candidates, and the reason for that is that they're playing here, and it would be fairly easy. So all of these fixtures are talking about their 11:05. All of the swaps talking about their 11:05 fixture, because of course anything else you do isn't going to end their day earlier. The only way you can end their day earlier is by moving this one further up here. This their match here somewhere further up here, and you could literally do that with, you could give them a much earlier one here, and that means swapping Chungman Rhinos all the way out to here. So actually that just swaps the problem from one club to another. And you can see exactly, what happens here, that their day goes from 2 hours and 20 minutes to 1:30, but somebody else's day goes to 2 hours and 20 minutes. So when you're looking at this, you just want to make sure that it's not causing any extra problem. And you can see here that this is, this would be a reasonable swap in the sense that it lengthens their day to 2 hours, but it's still not too bad. It only shortens the East Kowloon day by one match, but that might be an incremental improvement. And that's the earlier thing. Now, what if you wanted to make somebody's day later? Say Police 2 wanted, for whatever reason, they wanted to have a later start. So again, it's really only going to be looking at, they can only get a later start by their 9:15 match being swapped later. And as it happens, all of the candidates are in the 9:25 slot, so you're only moving them by one. And the reason for that is that, a question of who else is, pretty much, I suppose, anybody that you'd swap here is probably already playing up in these ones here. So you're either giving them a back-to-back match or a simultaneous match. And what this process does, what this routine does, is doesn't allow you to see those as options. Now, let's highlight the candidates here. You can see here for Valley, it doesn't do anything to their total day because they start and end at the same time. It does mean that instead of having a 3-match gap here and a 3-match gap here, that they would have a 4-match gap and a 2-match gap. I would say that that doesn't really make much difference. Now we do want to simulate this though, because we're swapping a smaller club with a larger club. So we look at who Police are playing already. They're playing Football Club, Centaurs, SCA and Tigers, and afterwards they would be playing, instead of playing Football Club 6, they'd be playing Football Club 4. As you can see here, just a swap, that those would be who their opponents would be. So there's really no difference from their perspective. Similarly, there's no difference from Valley 8's perspective. But we do want to then just look at whether Football Club 6 have a good spread of clubs. They're SAA, Police, Pirates and Centaurs. And afterwards, FC6 would be playing SAA, Valley, Pirates and Centaurs. So we might say, well, actually that shifts the balance a little bit too much towards them playing, the larger expat type clubs. And similarly for Football Club 4, they would have been playing beforehand they would have been playing Buffaloes, Valley, Tung Chung and Monkeys, but now they're playing Buffalo, Police, Tung Chung and Monkeys. And you might say, well, actually that's not ideal, because that means that they've got a less balanced set of opponents. So I would probably look at that and say, let's see if there are other ones that we could swap instead. So let's highlight a different one, this middle one, Tai Han Tung, and simulate it, and just see whether the opponents here, so basically Stingrays, what does that do to the Stingrays day? It doesn't make very much difference. It seems to be pretty much a wash. So in that case, I'm going to say let's make that swap. So these are all the different things that you can do here. I would, you would try to lengthen the day of all of these ones with a single match. Now in this case, there's only one fixture that does it. That one is probably fairly, probably doesn't make much difference, but you still have a look. I don't really know whether that's, maybe that's a more balanced day for them. This is probably, I don't know, perhaps this is probably a less balanced day for them. So, you basically have to take a judgment call on that. If you go to the single fixture optimization, the one thing that you can be sure of is that that you are not going to mess up effectively the balance of days, because you're not changing. All you're doing is changing the timing of a fixture. Whereas if you're if you go to the single team optimization, then you're changing the opponents as well. So I would suggest that you go first with this single fixture optimization and see what improvements you can make. There's really not a lot that it's offering at the moment, and what I think probably the reason for that is that if we go back to this grouping priority, you've got a pretty tight set of fixtures, in the sense that Group H is playing in all of these matches, match after match on the same pitch, and Group H has only got 5 teams, so almost any swap that you'd make would be up against the likelihood of forcing a team to play a back-to-back match. So the way that you design this would probably be to to move these up a bit and see what difference that makes to your schedule, and maybe even do another one where you move that up as well, and then you see whether by running that, in fact, I'm just going to run it here and see if it reaches a solution quickly. So it probably will. Okay, it's reached a solution. Now if we go back to the intervals report, and I'm going to copy the interval data. So this is our optimized set of information here. And then let's just calculate the intervals for this new one. Well, you can see that we've slightly reduced the number of on-off matches, even against the, okay, actually we've made it slightly worse here, but I think by optimizing it, we will probably be able to improve things. So I'm just going to click this. I'll jump ahead in terms of the editing of this. Okay, so and this is bizarrely has made it slightly worse. So let's try this optimization, give this another go and see whether it improves things or not. I think I might just, if I move that up to 3, see what that does, because okay, yeah, it's improved it a bit. It's given a couple here longer days. So really, you have to play around with this, and it may be that you decide that actually a different type of grouping priority is what you need. I'd be very tempted to do one more here, and then run again. And I'm going to jump ahead on this rather than forcing you to watch it. Okay, that's done. Let's go back to intervals and calculate intervals. Okay, so what we've got here is a lot shorter, a lot fewer with very short days, only 2, but we do have more at the long end. So again, if this is me, I would probably go back here and say maximum break, and let's see if we can do it again. Now, I'm not at all convinced that it's going to reach a solution here, but I'll try. So it is reaching a solution slowly, it seems. And you can see it's really having difficulty, but it is making progress, but it's challenging itself a lot more. It's doing a lot more resets. And then we go intervals and calculate intervals. Okay, so you can see they're probably not much better than what we did just with the auto filled in time slot, but you can never quite tell. And when you optimize, you might get improvements, or it may be that for a given one it's pretty much as good as you're going to get. And what I suspect we're going to be able to do though is have more options to lengthen the days, because we've given ourselves a bit more leeway. We've spread things out a lot more. So there you can see, we've got a lot more options to solve that particular example. I'm just going to pick another one and see if so we're getting more choices here. So this gives us a bit more flexibility by having the day a little bit more spread out, and so that would be something that you could look into doing.